When did you realize that someone you were cool with your whole life was actually really messed up? This guy was always a little weird, but we got along well. And then on a break from college while I was at my parents' house, his mugshot showed up on the local news as a person of interest in a child pornography case. I still remember my dad asking, "Isn't that a friend of yours?" The next day I ran into a mutual friend who gave me a few revolting details about the case. And then it was like all of the weird stuff from over the years immediately summed up in my head and I realized just how messed up the guy really was. This cool laid-back Brazilian guy went to 7th grade with me. I live in Peru and Spanish and Portuguese are mildly mutually intelligible, so we had a lot of fun as he playfully learned Spanish and had a carte blanche whenever it came to actually understanding school subjects. We all liked him but him and his family missed living in Brazil, so they went back the following year. We stayed friends on Facebook and he'd post jiu-jitsu tournament pics every now and then. Years later, a schoolmate found a Brazilian news article about him beating a woman for refusing to have sex with him on a date. He almost killed the poor girl. There was a following article about him having beaten his disabled brother for years. Caralho. That's though. I hope you're doing well. I had a cousin a couple years older than me who was killed in a car accident in his mid-20s. My younger sister didn't want to go to the funeral, and I tried to guilt trip her because her excuse was that she was spending the weekend with her boyfriend. A month after the funeral, she told me that our deceased cousin had molested her when she was younger. I had a 5th grade teacher that was freaking awesome. He had high energy, talked about partying and the girls that he'd bring home on the weekends. I thought he was so cool until I got old enough to realize bragging about hookups to a room of 11-year-olds is weird. This reminds me of my 5th grade teacher who talked about her divorce and when one of the students asked what he did she said another woman and I could instantly see regret on her face. I will never forget that as long as I live I was shocked she said it out loud to a classroom full of 11-year-olds. I used to attend and later worked at a Boy Scout camp. There was a staff member there that was well known and generally super well liked by both staff and campers. He was covered in tattoos and piercings but was still liked by even the super conservative people that would come there from time to time. Just generally a likable and fun person. He was arrested for child pornography a couple years ago. Apparently had thousands of images and videos. Worked at a Boy Scout camp. Oh no. My mom worked with disabled kids and had a good friend and colleague there who was one of the caretakers of kids living there permanently. He was a great teacher, husband and loving father. For almost a decade, every week she would drive this kid to the psychologist because they suspected he was abused and that he could use it, but he never told the psychologist anything. Then one day police starts an investigation because one of the night guard was giving massages to the kids. People start digging. Puzzle pieces come together. Turns out, the teacher caretaker, I don't know the English word, has been sexually abusing the boy for years and years. And because when my mom first brought him to the psych, he came along, the kid never dared to say the truth to the psych. After this my mom got a lot more vigilant and actually caught 2 more pedists during the rest of her career working in that school. She never again gave the benefit of the doubt. Never again thought, oh, he is such a kind person, he will never do that. Remember, abusers are usually people you love and trust. Remember, abusers are usually people you love and trust. Also, they tend to gravitate towards jobs, hobbies, or volunteer opportunities that put them in trust positions with their victim population of choice. It's gross, but it's true. Stay safe, guys. Trust people, children, when they tell you they have been abused. Not my experience but my husband's. He and his brother were friends with this guy through elementary to high school. I even saw him in home movies on VHS. Guy and his friend raped and murdered a young teen in her own home and now he's in jail for life. I had a very close friend from the age of 9 onward. He became a teacher and was very passionate about teaching. One day he raped a 12-year-old student at knife point. When a search warrant was executed on his house afterwards, there were hard drives filled with child pornography including pictures of kids from the soccer team he coached. He went to prison for 10+ years. That doesn't seem like long enough. There was this one guy in my friend group who I always thought was kinda weird, but his house was one of the few spots a large group of teenagers could hang out at late into the night. First red flag was him trying to hook up with multiple mutual friends, male. Despite having a girlfriend and making a lot of homophobic comments, he ended up, knowingly, giving multiple people STDs. My best friend borrowed the guy's phone and found CP in his search history and told basically everyone we knew. Most of our friend group stopped talking to him for obvious reasons. A few people still hung out with him even with that knowledge. We weren't really close, but a guy who was in my friend group in high school is now in prison for molesting his stepdaughter and possession of child P. We were all messed up when we found out we'd been friends with a pedo creep. My mom's adopted brother is younger than me, so growing up I always saw him as a little cousin. Was a real funny and energetic guy, and we'd hang out on family's holidays and whenever I visited my GMA. I went off to the military and I found out that he was sent to jail for hitting a guy with a skateboard in a fight. Supposedly the guy pulled a knife but got rid of it before the cops came, so my uncle went to jail for assault with a deadly weapon. Did a few years in prison, and when he got out he was an aspiring rapper with a great outlook on life, trying to better himself. He was out for 2 weeks before he was arrested for raping a 13-year-old. Found out that he actually went to jail the first time for robbing someone at gunpoint. Freaking piece of crap. LOL, yeah, I knew as soon as I read that skateboard story that it was going to be made up. One of my best friends since HS. His mom, dad and both sisters all had mental health issues, but he seemed to be relatively fine in that regard. In his mid-30s he began having mental episodes that progressively got worse. Myself and some other friends tried to help, and at first it was working, until he decided to stop taking his meds, which led to a severe breakdown. During this breakdown he threatened his landlord with a gun, then went back to his house and shot both of his dogs, which he loved like family. This event led to him being kicked out of his house. The landlord did not press charges, and being arrested for multiple animal abuse crimes. That's when we realized just how serious his issues were. After dealing with and moving past his legal issues, going to therapy and getting back on his meds, myself and some other friends got him get back on his feet by helping him find a place to live and employment at another friend's business. Things were going fine for a while until he had another episode and completely went off the radar. He quit going to work, loaded up his car and left the house where he was renting a room, not to be heard from for several months. He finally resurfaced in the news for shooting someone, non-fatal, during a dispute, of which we have still not learned the details of. We did learn that he had been homeless, living at a roadside campsite several miles south of the city during the time we had not seen or heard from him. He's been in jail since then, almost a year now, and still has not had his day in court. It's a really bad situation because he needs to mental health care rather than being locked up in jail, but there's not much any of us can do at this point. I found out in my 20s that an older family friend of mine, who was always a real laid-back, cool dude, has essentially been a functioning H addict since before I was born. I didn't even know you could be a functioning H addict. Best friend's mother was a drug addict, didn't register as a child. As an adult, Jesus, she really fricked up her life, and it's a miracle her son turned out okay. My best friend in first grade lived with her grandma, and when her mom and her mom's boyfriend had another baby, the baby lived with them too. Didn't register much weirdness then, but as an adult I found out that her mother and the boyfriend were both in and out of jail all the time. That was the fourth baby her grandma got handed to her to raise. When a close friend stole £2,000 from their parents and worked out when I was doing crap alone to then blamed it on me, so I didn't have an alibi. Luckily I was online with friends and could prove it, so his parents didn't take legal action. Haven't spoke to him since, and last I heard he was wanted for possession and assault. With friends like that you really don't need enemies, lol. Grew up really close to a cousin and we naturally grew apart as we got older. Saw him at my sister's wedding and talked about hanging out again. That never happened because he got arrested for distributing child P not long after that. It's had a major impact on my ability to trust people. How could someone I spent so much time with have these crazy desires and I never saw any sign of it? A guy I knew in high school turned out to be an incredibly abusive boyfriend. I never dated him, but he beat one of his girlfriends so badly she landed in the hospital. Another guy I knew in middle school ended up getting convicted for raping his underage cousin. I stayed away from them after I learned those facts. There's a lot of crap I can handle, but both of those were far too much for me. Close friend of mine when we got drunk and wanted to drive around 800 miles to kill his cousin. A few days after this event he confided in me that the cousin molested him as a child. Don't blame him for that. Also don't even blame him for the amount of illicit narcotics he consumes. The man has demons to kill. Sadly, it doesn't kill them. Not me, but my older siblings. One of their closest friends suddenly ended up in prison, which was very concerning. Turns out it was because he was sexually abusing his daughter. They all cut off all contact with him after that. My grandfather. My mother always described how good of a father he was, and he seemed like the nicer grandparent when he was still alive. Always calming down the situation my grandmother played up, giving advice and wisdom. When he died we said he probably immediately went to heaven, and as a kid I genuinely believed it. Found out recently a good 15 years later that when my aunt was assaulted at 13, he kept in contact with a guy who assaulted her for years after the fact. He knew about it, just acted like it didn't happen. Disturbs me greatly. That's unfortunately really common with that generation of people especially. My family had a family child molester and he was never ostracized from the family. I don't exactly understand how the adults thought that would go over smoothly. Who knows who else that pose hurt. Like excuse me CPS has entered the chat, you lazy fricks. We were catching up on families, and he mentioned his son's latest brush with the law. The son had been convicted of sexual assault, involving an attack on a woman unknown to him who had been walking on the beach after sunset. I inquired how he was coping with the reality of his son's transgressions, if it changed his regard for him, and wasn't that a difficult conflict to manage. He explained that it wasn't difficult because the rape wasn't a big deal because the victim was an old lady not likely a virgin. I was astounded. Not only by his attitude, but by the fact that I had been friends for decades with someone who held such an egregious view. This expression comes to mind, the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. A guy who I knew was a thief, but as far as I knew never stole from me or my family. We had been best friends since we were 12. We even went to prom together. I invited him over when we were 19 or 20 and he said he was going to use the bathroom, but I never heard the door close. I left the den and looked, and he was rooting through my backpack. I was in college, our eyes locked and he walked into the bathroom. Neither of us mentioned it, but I didn't see him again for like 5 years. We hung out every day for a while. Then he disappeared again. We are in our early 30s now and have finally reconnected. He has a very successful career and he told me he's changed. I hope it's true, because I freaking love that guy. Sounds like stealing may have been a compulsion for him. Some people do it when they don't even need or want whatever it is they steal. It is treatable with therapy. Friend's mom was a crack addict. Not entirely unusual in my neighborhood tbh. He always had different uncles coming in and out of the house though I never saw him talk to any. Hit me hard later on that those weren't uncles and mom was funding her habit. Like all the Santas that visited my mom on Christmas. When I was growing up, my parents became involved with Amway MLM. They had noble intentions, to get money to spend time with us, but it backfired. They were so involved with it that they were gone 4 nights of the week, and we never took a vacation without them voluntarily spending time at meetings. It wasn't until I had kids that I realized how much of my childhood they'd missed. I also became so used to solving things by myself before anyone noticed that it ties my insides up when someone offers to help. Amway orphans. I can relate. This one girl I went to a church camp with. She was really fun and nice and we exchanged social media at the end of the summer. I got home and added her on Instagram, only to find that she posts nudes, smokes, drinks, and does crack. We were 14 at the time. That's problematic. Had a crush on a guy in high school, even made out with him once. He ended up murdering his girlfriend, stuffing her in his trunk and dumping her body couple 100 miles away. Good God. Never let a nice set of abs distract me again after that. Dang those abs though. Maybe one more no. XBF. We had dated for 2-ish years. He was really sweet, super motivated to be a firefighter. and overall a really nice guy. Super goofy. I went to college and ended up breaking it off because something didn't feel right. He was being more secretive, more reserved. I thought it was the distance, us growing apart, what have you. A few years later my best friend sends me a pic of my ex's mugshot. He had been convicted on charges related to child P. I'm glad I trusted my gut. YTF are there so many people looking at child P? Why? It seems like everyone's got a story of someone who got caught for it. Ex-wife announced when she was 3 months pregnant that she was into group sex and was going to an orgy that weekend. She hoped I'd be cool with it and join her, but instead followed through with destroying the marriage by following through with her plan. Turns out she was cheating from day one. She's a philander to this day. When we were kids we were both abused physically. I only saw his dad once but I knew at least some of the horrible crap he went through. We were best friends from like 6 years old. Around the time of high school he started to get insanely bad about bullshitting and bragging. We had a tight group of friends. We both had girlfriends who were from our friend circle going back years, but this guy would brag and boast about all the pee he got and threesome and crap when his girl wasn't around. It was very fricked up and I had to tell him to knock it off a few times because his GF was my friend too. We all knew he was completely full of crap and heck we were with him 90% of the time anyways. Well, it go so bad his girl dumped him. Then I couldn't stand it anymore either and stopped hanging out with him. Then he joined the army and we all hoped it would fix his attitude a little. Skip ahead about 15 years. He's married and has 4 kids and moves back to town with his wife. He wants to meet up and reconnect. So I agree, and while he seems still the same guy, the balls is at a minimum. We have a few good times hanging out. Then I find out his whole life is rented. House, car, sofa, TV, kitchen table, bed, even his kids' bikes are on a rent-to-own scheme. Then he starts replacing things with bigger and bigger stuff. The 60-inch TV becomes a 90-inch TV, and this is in 2005-ish. Then the bull starts up heavier and heavier. My wife doesn't feel comfortable, particularly around his wife. She can't put her finger on it, but she decided she is done hanging out. Now his kids are amazing. His oldest is incredibly bright, like the kind of kid who doesn't want to watch TV and spends all her time tinkering with electronics and stuff. She was literally the smartest kid I had ever met. All his kids were so well behaved and smart and kind. But by this point I can't take the bullshitting anymore, so I stop hanging out with him. For 2 years we don't hear word from them. Then I find out through his mother that he and his wife both were arrested and convicted for sexually molesting the children. His mom was taking care of them, but there was a lot of DHS and doctor involvement. Apparently it was a long time thing and his wife was involved with it as well. It freaking killed me to hear it. We all knew he was fricked up because of the excessive attention-seeking behavior, but those kids were so special and he hurt them. Dude was my best friend since I could remember and he grew up to be a monster of the highest degree. A childhood friend that came to hang out when a mutual friend of ours visited after living out of state for a couple of years. He showed up clearly on something which wasn't really all that usual, but he started straight making up stories about his dad working for the Irish mob and he just would not leave when it was 2 AM and I wanted to go to bed. I ended up having to get our mutual to physically put him in my car and drive him home so we could get some sleep. When my former best friend stole a chainsaw and weed eater from my parents, I knew about some bad things he had done, but he had been my friend since grade school, so I overlooked them. I, female, had a good friend for many years and he always seemed like a nice sensitive guy. I knew some other guy friends of mine didn't like him and had issues with him, but I never really saw any of that. Anyway, I asked him to come down to where I was living to hang out a few years ago and found out that he was charged with raping his ex-girlfriend. I thought it was crazy, like there was no way, but he admitted to it and I found out the reason they dropped the hammer was there was another previous rape allegation against him with someone else. I had known him that whole time, and it turns out he was not only a rapist but a repeat offender. Like we had slept in a bed together on a vacation, not sexual, and I was very close with him. It really shook me that I had no idea he was like that. He always had really bad breakups and I always took his side. They were being not good enough for him, etc. But clearly there were some real issues I just was blind to. When I was 12 I was at a party and my dad spent the evening at his new girlfriend's house. He went to pick me up on his way home at the end of the night, also when my party ended. When we came home we found my oldest brother high on drugs and really drunk in the living room, all by himself. He threw up all over the place. My dad's first reaction was anger and he grabbed my brother and yelled at him to clean his mess and get his crap straight. There was always some sort of tension between them. They just never clicked, and after my mom died just a couple months before the night of this story, my brother was really angry all the time and he and my dad were arguing all the time. So back to the story. My dad grabbed my brother and he started yelling. They went into a pretty bad fight and were literally punching each other. My dad suddenly grabbed him and told me to open the front door. So I did. My dad literally threw my brother outside. But after a minute or so my brother started to punch through the glass pane inside the door. There was glass everywhere and my brother was all covered in blood. Glass cut his artery open and because of the drugs and alcohol in his body he was nearly bleeding to death. Police and ambulance came and carried him away. Since that day he doesn't live at home anymore. We barely speak and I only see him once or twice a year. His mind is still messed up of all the things he's been through. Nobody to help him. I feel sorry for him every day and wish I could help him. My friends and brother to me. I used to be the cool HS rebel with a serious attitude problem. I smoked and drank and fricked and people thought I was so cool. Then I robbed a liquor store and spent the next 11 years in prison. What's worse is I ruined my best friend's life too by strong-arming him into robbing the liquor store. My brother used to idolize me. I protected him from my dad and bullies in school. I was so cool to him because I defied everyone. He thinks I'm a sad pathetic loser now and doesn't believe I reformed. As for me, my second cellmate, he used to be so cool but now that I'm out and can reflect he's just really freaking scary. Dude was a straight up future serial killer. No remorse for anything he did. All the time I did with him he was a freaking badass and my friend. I read through your other comments. I really respect your honesty, openness and determination to change your life for the better. I haven't been to prison and would, by most standards, be considered an upstanding citizen, but I admire you. People will see the man you have become. Hang in there. For what it's worth, an internet stranger is proud of you and will be thinking of you. One of my best friends to this day was the one for me. She was always an ambitious hard worker, great student, smart, popular, all that. We were in the same class from second grade all through high school, but we weren't ever really friends until we both went to the same college and were both dating people back in our hometown. So we spent many long trips talking and became close. Eventually, she became the sister I never had. Then, she got dumped by a guy she thought was going to propose, and a couple weeks later, her first serious boyfriend, different one, they broke up long ago, but remained very good friends, died. She did not take it well. The cracks first started to show as she started dating shittier and shittier dudes. Soon, she wouldn't even tell me about them, because she knew what I'd say. We didn't live in the same town anymore, but kept in touch. I knew she was off, but thought it was depression. Then her spelling, grammar, and word choice went to crap on her texts. She was always a very good writer, and now she didn't make sense. Then she lost her job that she'd had for years. Then she lost her house and was couch surfing. Then she was basically squatting in an uninsulated shed with a sleeping bag and a Coleman lantern for heat light. I knew she did drugs from time to time. What I didn't know was she had tweaked her back freshman year of college, been prescribed Oxy, and had been keeping a pill habit under the radar for nearly a decade. A few shakeups broke her balancing act and sent her tumbling. I didn't even invite her to my wedding when I got married because she was just gone. But the story does have a happy ending. She's almost 3 years sober, engaged to a seemingly decent dude, and has a baby due in a few months. It was quite eye-opening to see someone close fall apart like that. Opioids ruin so many lives this way. Glad your friend is doing better. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.